saying that if you got fuel in your tank, you don't park your car. As you heard from Adam, this is my 14th town hall since February 1st. Public town halls, telephone town halls, I gotta say, it's probably more than the entire Republican conference has put on. It's a lot more. It's a lot more than many of my Democratic colleagues. So literally and figuratively, my car has been anything but parked, ladies and gentlemen. The 19th Congressional District is big, so I've been driving my car quite a bit, up and down the 19th Congressional District, doing town halls throughout the 19th Congressional District, but it's also why I do telephone town halls. Please understand this, to reach all parts of this district, and to be able to have certain guests on those town halls, which will allow them to kind of zoom in or speak in from different parts of the country. Now, what I've heard throughout my town halls, what I hear throughout the 19th Congressional District is absolutely understandable. People are angry, people are frustrated, and yes, people are fearful. You want to do something, and you also want to know what to do. Now, there was an interview on Sunday with John Stossel on This Week with Stephanopoulos with Bernie Sanders. And they asked him, I don't know if you saw this, they asked him, "You're saying fight back, what do you mean?" And his response was, "Well, that's the question, and we're working on that answer." Ladies and gentlemen, that's not my answer. As much as I respect Mr. Sanders, the answer is we have to win. But in order to win, we have to be strategic. In order to be strategic, we have to have knowledge and information. And that is why I'm doing so many town halls. That is why I'm active on social media. That is why I'm sending you newsletters sometimes 3 times a week to communicate with you everything that is going on. Everything that this administration is doing to challenge our Constitution and destroy our democracy. Everything that the Republican majority is doing to cut Medicaid. Everything that we in the minority are doing in and out of Congress. And everything so that you can have information so that together we can be strategic and we can win. Now, this is an official town hall, so I can't be too political in what I say, but I have ways to get around that to a certain extent. But I do want to provide you with information, especially what this administration, the Republican majority, Elon Musk, and Doge are doing to gut Social Security, to cut Medicare, and to cut Medicaid. That's why I'm doing this Medicaid town hall with these experts. It's why over the last week, I did a Social Security town hall with former SSA Commissioner Martin O'Malley. I hope you tuned in for that one. He really was able to highlight what is going on in the Social Security Administration. We had a meeting with him, the Democrats on the Ways and Means Committee had a meeting with him 3 weeks ago, and he kind of just laid it out there, a lot of information that we don't know what's going on with our Social Security. He was able to highlight that. Now look, I realize that this president has said that he won't touch Social Security. But then on the other hand, he's saying there's widespread fraud. He's saying that millions are being given out to the dead and undocumented. And Elon Musk even called it a Ponzi scheme. But let me tell you from the facts that Martin O'Malley talked about, and according to an IG report, it found that from 2015 to 2023, less than 1% of Social Security payments were improper. Now, yes, there were mistakes that were being made, but they were overpayments, not payments to the dead and undocumented immigrants. However, what we do know is that undocumented immigrants are paying into Social Security $22 billion. A year. Now look, we can all agree, especially if you call that 1-800 number, that the SSA services need to be improved. But if there's fraud, waste, and abuse, we need a plan to get rid of it. It needs to be surgical, it needs to be careful, it needs to be tactical, and it needs to be transparent. Instead, we have Donald Trump allowing Elon Musk and Doge to overhaul the Social Security Administration with a chainsaw. Now, the Wall Street Journal, of all papers, the Wall Street Journal even wrote this week that the SSA has already a 50-year low of staffing, yet it's serving an all-time high of recipients. And so they said it's barely hanging on, and it could get worse if the administration follows through with its plan to cut 7,000 jobs and close 47 field offices. O'Malley said if that happens, that will guarantee a system collapse. So why the hell is this administration doing this? This administration is doing this, I believe, in my opinion, because they want to cripple and crater the SSA. They want to turn the public against it, and that gives them a green light to privatize it. That's why they're doing this. Now, we talked about the solvency issue up in 2035 of the SSA, and that can be fixed if we remove the earnings cap of the highest earners and give that to the trust fund. But we're not doing that. We're not even talking about it. Instead, this administration, Elon Musk and Doge, are wrecking it to rob it, as O'Malley said. Wrecking it to rob it. But this is where we're at, ladies and gentlemen, with this administration, with Elon Musk, and it's why you are here today to get information. That's just part of my job and my service to the 19th Congressional District. Now, as many of you know, as a federal representative, my job is to make the federal government work for you. That's why I'm a Democrat, because I believe that the federal government can help people, not hurt people. And I've seen that throughout my life, that it's been able to do that. I've seen that throughout the 8 years, and the proud 8 years, and the humbling 8 years I've been in this position as a U.S. representative. That's exactly why on November 6th, I held a meeting with staff. And I basically said, look, coming up here, because a lot of them did not serve in Trump 1.0. And I told them, look, you're going to have a lot coming at us over these next few years. A lot. It's going to be overwhelming. But please, please do not get distracted in our obligation to serve the constituents of the 19th Congressional District, because that is what you, the constituents, deserve. A representative who understands what it means and what it takes to get government to work for you and not get distracted. Now, at the same time, though, we can walk and chew gum, and that we will continue to fight back and make sure our system of checks and balances is strong. As proven, I can walk and chew gum at the same time. And I have to in this district, which, as you heard, is a very, very big district. And I'm going to tell you what it entails again, because many of you, I'm sorry to say, in my experience going throughout the 19th Congressional District, still don't know the boundaries of the 19th Congressional District. Raging Waters up in San Jose. You guys know where that is, Lake Cunningham. That's the northernmost part of our congressional district. It then swoops down through San Jose, South San Jose, up over the hill, all of Santa Cruz except Watsonville, which unfortunately got gerrymandered out. It then goes down the Monterey County coastline all the way to Cambria. You hit Cambria, and then you take a hard turn east with the Tascadero being the most southern town, all the way out to the Kern County border with northern San Luis Obispo. It looks like a big L or a banana or a crescent moon, whatever you want to call it. It's a big district. It's a diverse district in so many ways. But it's a dynamic district, and it allows me to basically really employ the balance that I need to do as a U.S. representative. It is not a monolithic district whatsoever. And so I make sure I do that by governing the 3 pillars. Legislation, making sure that we continue from the federal angle to work on the top issues in Washington, D.C. for the 19th Congressional District. Affordable housing and Medicare reimbursements. Environment and immigration reform. Funding, that's the second leg. Making sure that there are funding for our infrastructure projects. And third, casework, making government work for you. If you have a problem with the federal government, please contact my office. If you have a problem with the Veterans Administration, with Social Security, with IRS, with getting a passport the day before a trip, which can be tough, but we've done it before thanks to my staff. We've done it before. Those types of issues, please know you can call my office, and please know we do everything we can to help you, because what I've seen is that's how we're able to affect people's lives. The fact that people come up to me today and tell me about the work that my office has done for them at a personal level to make federal government work for them, it shows you how impactful we can be. That is my job. That's my responsibility to serve my district. And what we've seen is that the constituents of the 19th Congressional District appreciate that. It's why that I got close to 70% of the vote in last election. It's why, according to the ballotbook.com, that I was the #1 overperforming Democrat in California out of 43 races. The #1 overperforming Democrat. Because I believe that good governing is good politics. And as I've always said, I will work with anybody that helps me serve the 19th Congressional District. But I've always said I will also fight anybody that takes away and threatens our values in the 19th Congressional District. And when you have an administration in Elon Musk who are wrecking government, weakening government, and making it so you don't get the services that you pay for and that have been earned, that is when I will fight anybody on any side of the aisle. Absolutely, government has waste, abuse, and fraud. We know that. And it needs to be found, it needs to be prosecuted, and it needs to be reformed. But you cannot allow Elon Musk to take a wood chipper to it, to wipe out workers, to wipe out the system, and allow access to our personal information to do that. The government and its systems will seize up, and you will not get the services that you deserve. You break down our institutions, that's when you break down our democracy. That's why we are sounding the alarm, and that's why we are fighting back. Now, making sure our system of checks and balances works is the most important way we can do this. And I admit, and I know you know this, it's not fast enough. Got it. I get it, okay? The Congress and the courts do not act as fast as the executive branch. And the president knew that. Why do you think he put forward 72 executive orders in the first month of his administration? Over 90 orders, executive orders total. They want to flood the zone, or as the president's Svengali, Stephen Bannon said, they want to have this muzzle velocity that put us on our heels. And I know you would know that. I know we know that. It did put us on their heels. Took us a while to basically get our footing and start moving forward. But these are the consequences of the last election, and he feels that he's in a position to govern the way he wants, but he cannot do that in a way that's unconstitutional. He should not do that in a way that's disruptive, and that is why we're going to hold this administration accountable. Now, there are 5 ways we are fighting back, ladies and gentlemen. 5 pillars, as I call it. Legislation, investigation, litigation, communication, and mobilization. Let me repeat that. Legislation, investigation, litigation, communication, and mobilization. Okay? Now, hopefully you grabbed a sheet on the way in that you got it right in front of you. I see it right there. That lists everything that we're doing in those categories. You see the number of areas of pieces of legislation that we've authored and introduced to fight back on this administration. You've seen the number of letters of inquiries that we've sent to this administration to demand transparency in what they're doing and their destructive efforts. The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, is that you have a president who's in charge of the administration, so we're not going to get our letters answered. You have a problem in that we are in the majority. Democrats are in the minority. It takes 218 votes out of 435 to pass legislation. Guess how many Democratic members there are? 215. We're in the minority. We don't have enough to pass this legislation, and Speaker Johnson will not put those pieces of legislation on the floor. So we're left with a Republican-controlled Congress that is showing absolute acquiescence to this administration and abdicating its role under Article 1, Section 8. Now, the good thing is that agencies and spending by Congress can only be abolished and stopped by Congress. And that is what is being reinforced by the courts. That's why our litigation pillar is so darn important right now. There have been 130 lawsuits that have been filed. And we may not win all, but man, you look at that list that I gave you, we are winning many of them, especially on the important issues with enjoinments and TROs and injunctions that have been filed. Now, I know what many of you are thinking right now, because I've heard it over and over. What happens when Trump ignores the court orders? What happens? Like he did last weekend with the Alien Enemies Act. The 4th time in U.S. history he has employed that act has been put into effect. Now, what the AEA says is that you can deport people if you're in a war and you've been invaded or there's a predatory incursion. His theory is that gang members need to be removed based on the AEA. The court stopped that removal. Yet, 3 planes still took off. 3 planes still took off. Trump is very shrewd in picking its political targets. We know that. He wants to remove gang members and the legal process be damned. He wants to make safety the priority over the rights of violent thugs, and he wants to move them beyond the reach of the U.S. law and process. But we have a process in this country. Trust me, as someone who was a court officer for nearly 20 years, it's called due process. Judges want to uphold due process, and let me tell you, as someone who's married to a judge, judges do not like being ignored at all, okay? So this judge got ignored, and that's why he ordered them to show cause. It's why he then stopped basically the use of the AEA at this time. That drew a rebuke by President Trump calling for this judge's impeachment, if you can believe that. Now look, we've impeached judges before in our history, but they're for being drunk on the bench, they're for being criminals and for taking bribes, not for disagreeing with a judge. That is the appellate process. That's what you use, and that's why there was a rebuke by Chief Justice Roberts. Now, to me, that shows that the Supreme Court is going to be receptive to pushing back as a bulwark. And the ways that courts can push back are with fines, with penalties, with sanctions, and yes, with arresting the attorneys for non-compliance. Now, the same thing basically is communication and coordination. That's why this is so important. That's why I'm doing these town halls. And then ultimately it leads to mobilization, to hold this administration accountable, but more importantly, to mobilize those constituents in other districts who have representatives, to hold those representatives accountable that support these types of votes. That's the most important thing. Now, I want to address a couple more things until we get to our experts and get to questions, because I believe we have to have this information out there. I want to talk about the continuing resolution vote that was done 2 weeks ago. As you know, I voted no. I voted no for a number of reasons. I voted no, one, because Republicans stopped negotiating with Democrats 3 weeks ago. They basically said, got up from the table and stopped negotiating. That's not how you legislate. Number two, there were cuts in this bill to infrastructure projects, agriculture projects, food programs, NIH, and rent subsidies. 3, there was no funding for disaster relief. 4, it expanded the authority of the executive branch by putting money into large buckets rather than line iteming it. Therefore, that gave the president more authority to determine where the spending does and does not go. That's why I voted no. Unfortunately, the Republicans were able to come together and pass it in the House. And boy, did it put Chuck Schumer in a tough position. It put Democrats in a tough position because either you had to vote for that bill or let there be a government shutdown. And the problem is, ladies and gentlemen, is that this wasn't going to be an ordinary government shutdown. I've been through a government shutdown. I've been through 2 back in 2018 and 2019. And let me tell you, I do not like government shutdowns. They're horrible because people and families get hurt with government shutdowns. But they try to do, during the shutdowns, you try to do stuff to remedy the situation. Call them essential workers, get them back to work while we start to negotiate. This administration would not use those tools, we know that. Instead, they would use it to their benefit and to their advantage to chip away at our institutions, to weaken them even further than they're already trying to do. So it was a lose-lose situation. The problem is that Chuck Schumer's messaging was absolutely horrible on this. He didn't make the situation clear. It led to a back and forth. It led to an incoherent message, and it left people pissed off. Got it. And unfortunately, after the vote, it left the focus on the Democratic infighting. It became a distraction from President Trump abandoning Ukraine, a distraction from administration officials sharing classified information, making these crazy, inconsistent tariff policy decisions, These random firings, rehirings, and reckless cuts. It distracted people from knowing that this country is going in the wrong direction. Consumer confidence is down, the stock market's down, jobless claims are up, inflation's up, egg prices are up, grocery prices are up, measles spread is up, bird flu spread is up. But ladies and gentlemen, we still have time to ensure a unified message, especially when they have a national security team who's basically spreading classified information over signal and text, especially with the upcoming reconciliation package. Basically a package in which they are planning to cut essential services like Medicaid to pay for cuts for billionaires. This is why we're here today, because what this reconciliation package is just an extension of the tax cuts of the bill that was passed back in 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCJA. Once again, they passed that through a reconciliation process. So what is reconciliation? All it means, ladies and gentlemen, you have to pass it through a majority in the House, got it, check, that's what they standard, that's what you always do. But in the Senate, they don't have to abide by the 60-person filibuster. All you need is 51 members of the Senate in the filibuster. So it can't be a purely partisan process. The issue that you're going to see over these next few weeks is how you pay for these tax cuts for billionaires. There are ways in which they're going to do it. First and foremost, what I think it's going to come down to is debt and deficit. Basically having our sons, daughters, grandsons, and granddaughters pay for this bill. And you're going to hear this more and more, so I want to get this in you, for you to start thinking about this. They're doing it through this process called baselining, okay? And what baselining is what their theory is. It's a gimmick. What their theory is that the TCJA cost $3.7 trillion. Their theory is that because the TCJA is current policy, it's going to get extended, therefore it shouldn't be a part of their bill. You see what I'm saying? I know, it blows your mind, but that's the thinking that they're saying. Once again, $3.7 trillion, part of current policy, it's going to go forward anyways. What they're saying, if they pass this bill, therefore it shouldn't be part of the bill. It's ridiculous, but that's what they're trying to say in order to put that 3.7 into our debt and deficit. The second way they're going to try to pay for it is through tax revenues and the growing economy to help pay. They are saying that the economy is going to grow by 2.6%. They're going to get tax revenues. That's going to help. All the experts say the economy is only going to grow by 1.8%. Third, this is why we're here. Because they've asked committees in Congress to cut their budgets. And one of those committees they've asked to cut, as you heard from Adam, is the Energy and Commerce. $880 billion in cuts. Now, Energy and Commerce has purview over Medicaid and Medicare. And they have a $25 trillion budget. If you cut $880 billion, with a B, from that budget, and then 98% of that $25 trillion goes to Medicaid or Medicare, guess what you're gonna have to cut? Medicaid or Medicare. Now, what they've said is that Medicaid has had waste, fraud, and abuse. Once again, they're using this as the excuse. But let me tell you, and as you're going to hear, it's going to be very, very destructive for the families here on the Central Coast. Why I voted no for the Budget Committee resolution for this reconciliation package. Why I'm communicating with you about it. Why we get mobilized about it to ensure that if there are any members of Congress who are supporting these types of cuts, they need to be held accountable. That's why we're here today, ladies and gentlemen, allowing me to provide you with information and facts, allowing me to hear from you about how reckless, how mindless, and how destructive this administration and Speaker Johnson are being, but also how beneficial these types of programs are to you, and that we have the receipts to prove it. Going forward, it is not going to be easy, as I said from the beginning, as these are very divided and destructive times. It won't be easy for you, for our families, for Democrats. It won't be easy for our nation. But what I can say, and I think what we know, is that the United States doesn't do easy. When you ask people to tell you about a time that made them who they are as a human being, It's very rare that they talk about a Hawaiian vacation, okay? It's usually those times that they went through that were really hard. Moments that can carve through you to the basement of who you are. And it's at times like this that we see ourselves in a profound way. At times like this, we can be either broken or broken open. We know that we can do better. But despite that narcotic of nostalgia, that feeling that we love to think about the good times, tough times are the rule in this country, not the exception. But it's what we do during those tough times that break us open. When you look back at our history, it is sobering. It is a sobering reminder that protest, divisive politics, and partisan rancor have been near constants in the United States. But we've grown as a country, not through a happily merry ride, but through the process of rupture and repair. We realize that we are not perfect in any way. However, our imperfection allows us to strive to be that more perfect union. That's how I look at this job as your U.S. representative. That's why we're here today. And together, ladies and gentlemen, that's how we must move forward. And some of the people that are going to help us today are our experts to talk about this